We're with Brian Sletten of Bosatsu Consulting, LA company. So you've been working with the Semantic Web lately, right?
Yeah, actually I've been working with it for quite some time. I first started building a system on it for the intelligence community about 6 years ago, and have been working on a variety of bits of infrastructure, advocacy, evangelism, sort of trying to find ways of explaining it to people. So yeah, it's been fun watching it show up. It's obviously taken longer than people were expecting, but I think there's clear evidence that in the past couple of years, the adoption rate is really kind of going through the roof.
Okay, so I think a question that I have, and one that a lot of people have, is we know what the web is, but what is the semantic web?
Well, the good news is that the semantic web is also the web. It is not a separate web. It is not Web 3.0 or anything silly like that. It's really just a way of taking the information that we have and connecting it and organizing it in a way that we care to see it. When people hear about these things, they think it tends to be very academic, navel-gazing, sort of out in left field. But the reality is there have been a series of enabling technologies that have been pushing us towards higher levels of abstractions. So TCP/IP allowed us to forget about the physical location of computers and think about how they're logically connected. HTML and HTTP allowed us to think about documents and how one document might relate to another. We can put reviews about documents and things like that in connected, very democratic platform. And that allowed us to forget about computers, really, and file systems and how these things were stored, and just think about the abstraction of a document. And all we're really saying now is we don't really care about documents either, or databases, or any kind of information container. We care about information and how it connects. So the semantic web is really just about coming up with some machine processable infrastructure for connecting concepts that exist in our relational databases, that exist in our documents, that exist, in our RESTful services, and allowing individuals to explain and express and share information in a machine processable way. It doesn't have to be really, detail-oriented, hands-on, painful to type in. A lot of people think that nobody's ever going to type in this kind of metadata. And the reality is, when they find value in adding metadata, they certainly do. But a lot of this stuff will be automated. A lot of it will be published through templates. A lot of it will be handled by user interfaces. But what we need is a data model that allows us to accept arbitrary facts in ways that allow us to accumulate information about certain topics. A lot of people also think that it means that we all have to agree to the same terms in relationships, and that's also not the case. That was one of the things that we learned from large-scale efforts around XML standardization, is that fundamentally people have different needs, and they see the world in different ways, and we're not going to get everybody to agree to the same terms. And so there will be pockets of communities around certain domains, like publication metadata. Librarians got together and published the Dublin Core vocabulary. Friend of a friend is a sort of a decentralized social networking vocabulary for describing who you are, who you know, what you're interested in. It doesn't require a central server. You can discover these connections on web pages, or people can publish links to their profiles on their business cards. There are sites now that allow you to convert Twitter account information into a FOF profile. LiveJournal limits FOF profiles. So these things can be generated on the fly, and it's really just about having a data model that allows us to accumulate these facts and relationships kind of as we go.
Right. So as you walk through the different progressive technologies, each one of those allowed kind of a different class of application, different capabilities within the application. What kind of capabilities do you see the semantic web adding to applications?
Well, the reality is, what we have seen so far, and the excitement that we've, and the way the web has changed our lives, is really just the tip of the iceberg. Because all of this information that is contained on documents, that is contained in databases and RESTful services, we're now going to be able to connect up to it. And we're going to be able to really focus on integrating public and private information. For example, a conference might have a couple of different locations, like the NoFluff conference moves around, and by default you might want to go to the one that's closest to you. But that information might conflict with your calendar, which indicates that you've got a wedding to go to that weekend. And so we want this privately held information to be able to connect to the publicly available information without requiring us to push that sensitive information out into the public space. And so we will simply be able to deal with more context, when we are exposed to information, how it applies to us, how we see the world, as a way of organizing the information that comes to us from the web. And it's going to lower the cost of acquisition and reuse. It's going to increase business functionality. We're going to be able to imagine parsing RSS feeds that mention us or our company or competitors, and then tie that into various other public information sources, various relational database kinds of sources.
Right.
Alisa means the housekeeping.
We'll be able to indicate on calendars that certain rooms are used for interviews and not for sleeping.
For housekeeping.
That's right. So we can integrate the hotel scheduling with the housekeeping schedule. No, it's really about reclaiming the information that's out there, and using terms that allow this connectivity to be extended.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I indicated that I live in Los Angeles and just use the string literal Los Angeles, that becomes kind of a dead end. You can't follow that somewhere else. But if, however, I point to one of the large databases like DBpedia or Freebase or the U.S. Census information or anything that has a global identifier for the city of Los Angeles and information around it, then that now becomes a connection between where I live and the fact that I express about myself and the population and the median income and the number, the counties and surrounding areas and the kinds of things that are of interest there. And this is largely where the success of the linked data project is coming from. Basically, Tim Berners-Lee just asked people to start sharing their information. And so we have all these public data sets that a small group of people are starting to connect. And so facts that are true about Los Angeles here and here and here can all be accumulated into an aggregate view. And then when I assert a relationship between, say, myself and the city of Los Angeles, all of that information then can be kind of grafted onto what we know about me, if I choose to allow it into my view of the world. Right. So we'll have filters about where this stuff comes from, but it's largely about the context of who we are, where we find ourselves, and what we're interested in, and then allowing us to sort of reshape the information in ways that make sense to us.
Right. So there are now software tools up and coming that allow us to make these connections that we otherwise wouldn't have even thought of or would have been difficult to do.
Right, and so it seems non-intuitive to people who have 10, 20, 30 years of relational database experience that the database is actually not the place to do this kind of integration, because it's got a very formal view of how information is structured. And if there is a new fact that's added that may not apply to everyone, but is still a fact on the margin that could be of use at some point, like, say, your blood type. If I know your blood type and I don't know that for anyone else, then what am I going to do? Am I going to add a column to my database and add one single fact or create a new table for every new single fact that I get? So that model actually doesn't scale up well to the kinds of flexible domains or the way people have different views about domains. And so common models tend to throw marginality on the floor. And as we're doing drug discovery and intelligence and publication information and trying to find how things are connected, we just simply can't afford to throw, marginality on the floor. What may not be of use to most people becomes of use to someone in a particular scenario. So we have data models that allow us to accept this and store it without any huge burden like we would have to do to capture that information in a relational database.
Right. Right. Very interesting. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.